A single shot from a 50 caliber Browning machine gun releases enough kinetic energy, over 13,000 foot-pounds, to conceptually lift a small car 5 feet into the air. When that sheer, unstoppable force meets the contained hydraulic system of a human skull, the resulting violence isn't merely lethal, it's a catastrophic phase transition. We are talking about disintegration. The M2 Browning heavy machine gun and the specialized anti-material rifles that fire the 7x99mm NATO cartridge were never intended for organic targets. This round, weighing anywhere from 650 to over 800 grains, was engineered during World War I to defeat light armor plating, penetrate engine blocks, and neutralize infrastructure. It is a tool of brute geopolitical force, flying downrange at velocities often exceeding 2,800 feet per second. The question isn't whether it will kill. The question is, what manner of instantaneous obliteration does it inflict when confronted with the biological containment vessel that is the human cranium? To conduct this grim analysis, we must first understand the physics at play. A typical 9mm or 5.6mm rifle round kills primarily through tissue disruption and massive blood loss. The 50 BMG operates on a fundamentally different principle: hydrostatic shock and explosive energy transfer. The human head is a contained system, a hard, relatively inflexible skull surrounding the brain, which is essentially water-based tissue, around 80% water, suspended in cerebrospinal fluid. When a projectile traveling at nearly Mach 3 enters this sealed environment, the water molecules cannot compress fast enough or escape the cavity instantly. Our first test involves a high-fidelity ballistic analog, a simulated human head equipped with tissue analogs and fluid-filled sacs designed to mimic the resistance and behavior of the human brain under extreme pressure. From a distance of 7 yards, a relatively simple, non-expanding projectile is chambered. The prediction from many observers in the field often leans toward a clean pass-through, perhaps blowing out the back of the skull, based on the assumption that the high velocity might minimize energy transfer. This assumption is tragically and scientifically flawed. The moment the bullet impacts between the eyes, the resulting explosion defies expectation. This is not just tissue tearing, it is the instantaneous conversion of massive kinetic energy into internal pressure. The temporary wound cavity, which in soft tissue might measure several inches wide, is constrained by the unyielding bone of the skull. That energy, unable to dissipate externally, is transferred violently into the contained fluid. The pressure spike is so intense, a form of supercavitation, that the tissue structure fails universally. The skull does not merely fracture, it is reduced to high-velocity shrapnel, radiating outwards. The analog target vanishes in a cloud of vaporized material and high-velocity organic debris. The energy dump is complete and instantaneous. There is no entry or exit wound in the traditional sense. There is only a zone of total disintegration, leaving behind only the largest fragments of the simulation, scattered dozens of feet away. We find pieces of the simulated vertebrae, confirming that the force wasn't localized. It propagated downward through the neck structure. This violent outcome fundamentally debunks the clean pass-through hypothesis for direct hits. The sheer mass and velocity of the 50 BMG ensure maximum energy transfer, regardless of expansion. Now, let's address one of the most persistent and exaggerated myths in modern battlefield folklore: the lethal near miss, often attributed to the massive shockwave generated by the 50 caliber round. Stories persist of soldiers having limbs torn off or suffering lethal internal injuries simply because the round passed within a few feet of their body. To test this, our second shot is deliberately aimed for a near miss, targeting the edge of the analog ear. If the shockwave theory were true, the close passage of a nearly supersonic projectile should generate enough turbulent energy or temporary pressure fluctuation to cause significant trauma to the delicate internal structures of the skull. The result? A remarkably clean, localized effect. The bullet cleanly clips and removes the analog ear structure, creating a defined entry path, but the rest of the skull remains fundamentally intact. There is no explosion, no sign of massive internal pressure transfer. This outcome is a scientific confirmation of basic aerodynamic design. Ballistic projectiles, particularly military rounds, are meticulously engineered for flight stability. Their shape is designed to minimize air resistance and turbulence. While a sonic boom is generated, the pressure differential required to cause traumatic injury, lethal cavitation, requires direct tissue contact or an incredibly close proximity that physically displaces the air columns surrounding the tissue at the molecular level, something a 3-foot miss simply cannot achieve. The near-miss myth is exactly that, a myth, likely fabricated to explain traumatic injuries in high-stress combat situations. Our third scenario explores the margin of error, the grazing hit. What happens when the round strikes the heavy, dense structure of the cheekbone, partially impacting the containment vessel, but not traversing the center mass of the brain analog? This test represents a partial energy dump. Hitting the cheekbone introduces the projectile's kinetic force to the bone structure, causing a massive, immediate skull fracture. Since the projectile trajectory skims the interior, the resulting damage is less of a total spatial explosion than the first test, but equally lethal. The impact violently fragments the skull plate. While the projectile itself may not have passed through the entire brain region, the sudden expansion of the temporary wound cavity inside the containment volume acts like a high-pressure ejection system. The simulated brain material, still fluid-saturated, is forcibly ejected through the newly created skull fissures and the gaping cheek wound, landing intact but separated from the body analog. This demonstrates that even a glancing, non-fatal trajectory through the tissue can be made instantly lethal by the destruction of the containment structure and the ensuing hydrostatic trauma. Finally, we introduce a dramatic counterpoint, the 500 S&W Magnum. This is a massive revolver cartridge, not a rifle round, but utilizing an extreme high-performance projectile, the 425-grain vaporizer hollow point, a round designed for maximum expansion and terminal energy transfer at shorter ranges, traveling at a much slower velocity, closer to 1,500 feet per second, half the speed of the BMG. The difference here is the mechanism of destruction. The 50 BMG relies on extreme velocity to generate hydrostatic shock and a massive temporary cavity. This 500 Magnum, especially with a specialized hollow point, relies on mass and rapid, violent expansion. Fired point blank, the result is brutal but localized. The round hits, expands immediately to nearly an inch in diameter, and dumps all its energy within the first few inches of penetration. The result is the complete fragmentation and removal of the upper cranial structure, a perfect canoeing effect. The lower jaw and neck often remain, but the entire top section of the head is violently atomized. This test confirms that even lower velocity rounds, when engineered for maximum expansion, can be incredibly destructive, though the physical signature of the damage is distinct from the hypervelocity shock of the BMG. In conclusion, the 50 caliber BMG demonstrates a level of destructive power that exceeds virtually any conventional small arms systems used against organic targets. Its mechanism of destruction transforms the human skull into an instant fragmentation grenade, utilizing hydrostatic shock to achieve total structural failure. The findings are clear, whether by direct impact, which results in vaporization, or by a grazing hit, which causes explosive ejection. The 7x99mm round is a definitive terminal instrument. It offers zero margin for error and zero chance of survival. Understanding these terminal ballistic effects is crucial for appreciating the raw technological power wielded on the modern battlefield. But the BMG is not the final word in destructive ballistics. There are rounds, far less understood, designed specifically not for anti-material purposes, but for maximizing soft tissue trauma via fragmentation and delayed detonation. In our next deep dive, we will shift focus from pure kinetic power to engineered systemic failure, the terror of the VOG-25 grenade fired from the GP-25 underbarrel launcher. Can a low-velocity airburst fragmentation grenade truly be more terrifying than a 50 cal round? Don't miss our analysis on the fragmentation radius and pressure wave capability of these specialized infantry weapons. Click here to ensure you are notified when that video drops.